Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. We look at life through a biblical lens. We generally solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. Today is July 3rd, and we're celebrating the 4th of July a little bit early. I wanted to share some of the events surrounding the early days in America, the 1776 to be exact. And I wanted to do that from a perspective, a 21st century perspective. Today, it seems that people believe that America is racist. It believes that in 1776, the colonies were racist, that the signers of the Declaration of Independence were racist. Everybody's racist. I mean, it's just a common canard. I mean, we see it all the time. We also look at these men and we say, you know, they weren't Christians. Ben Franklin certainly wasn't. Thomas Jefferson cut up his Bible. We had agnostics. We had, humanists and different kinds of people in there, atheists and all that. And they did not create or craft any kind of a Christian document or a Christian country. And all of that is technically true, but it is not exactly accurate. And so I wanted to spend a few minutes and just walk through some of the events that occurred 240 years ago, introduce you to what was said and who was doing the saying and what kinds of things were happening. Just today I watched a YouTube of a young fellow, he's in his mid-40s, standing on a street corner in San Diego, California, asking passersby what they knew about the Declaration of Independence, what they knew about the founding of this country. And to a man, a woman, nobody knew anything. They couldn't quote any part of it. They didn't know the players. They didn't know the dates. They didn't know why we celebrated the 4th of July. Somebody knew it was independence, but they didn't know who independent from whom. Of course, at the end, there was a young lady who quoted the whole thing. I mean, she knew. Why do young people and people up into their 40s not know this stuff? We all learned this in school, didn't we? No. Our so-called public school system, which is really a federal school system, has stopped teaching these things. And it isn't that there aren't some schools that do teach it, and it isn't that they have completely ignored it, but they don't teach it. They like to start American history sometime after what they call the Civil War. It's really the war between the states. We didn't have a civil war. Sometime during Reconstruction. And they like to do that because that's where we began to craft this new country that was free of all of the encumbrances and so forth. But if we go back in time and we read the documents and we read the history of these people and we understand what they were saying and why, it starts to make a little different sense. Here's the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We want to go. We need to go. Here's why. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. White men, black men, brown men, yellow men, green men, purple men, human beings created equal. That they are endowed not by their government, but by their Creator, with certain unalienable, you cannot change them, you cannot take them away, rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That isn't, I get to stand out in the rain and just enjoy life. the pursuit of happiness, in the context of 18th century language, had the idea that you were free to go about your business and to do the things that you felt were important, and to grow and to build and to buy and to all the wonderful things that life offers. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. It was true then, it's true now. And to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and that happiness I told you about. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, no, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. Here begins a representative list of the governmental abuses by the King of England, by Parliament, by the business owners, and all these other people. Some people have said that the United States was formed in rebellion. There was no rebellion. It was a revolution. We revolved into another form of government. But you are under the authority of this king, and the Bible says that you are to obey those that have the authority over you. Yes, you are. But when that authority is abusive, when it is unjust, you need to change that authority or get out from under it. And here in this Declaration of Independence, these colonists listed the grievances. And these are grievances that they pursued over a period of 10 or 20 years. This all didn't happen in the last 20 minutes. And they laid them out. And what they're saying here is, we tried. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. It is true, they viewed the colonies as vassals to do with as they saw fit, not as English citizens. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, such as the quartering of large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy. The idea of that which is detrimental to faith. The breach of sacred faith, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their own country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections against us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble of terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity, a relationship by common ancestry. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, peace in friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world. For those of you educated in a state school, that means God. For the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Do you find racism anywhere in this document? The belief that race accounts for differences in human character or ability, and that a particular race is superior to others. Do you find discrimination here? The ability or power to see or make fine distinctions, discernment. Yes, everyone is and should be discriminating. We need to discriminate based on ability, need, education, in some cases height, strength, talent, based on appearance. Think Miss America. Don't put a bunch of ugly people up there. Based on wealth. Think investments. But no racism and no rebellion. These people had tried for decades to get the British Crown to stop abusing the colonies. When it became clear that they were unwilling to do so, these colonies got together, these men being the representatives thereof, and they wrote to the king and to Parliament and explained what they were doing and why. And with that, they broke from this unjust monarchy. No rebellion.